Hey Jessica, it's amazing to connect with you. How are you doing?
To connect with you. Good morning for me. I don't know what time it is, or afternoon for me.
It's 7 p.m. here.
Okay, well, good evening. So we're right on the same schedule then.
Exactly. Um, so I know our audience would be so excited to hear from you, and I was hoping you could just tell me a little bit about how you landed up where you are right now.
Well, if you want to talk about just getting to Orange, I had been asked to audition for several roles, but we knew very little about the show when it was first coming up. We knew that Genji was behind it,
Okay.
and we knew that it would be on the computer. Like that's kind of all we knew about it.
Okay.
But then we'd see who, like Jen Houston was behind the casting, and I trust her very much, and I had been auditioning for her for years.
Okay.
And they got to a point where I was just giving up because they'd call me in and no, and they'd call me in and no, and they'd call me in and no, and I was ready to quit. But they called me in for this final role. She said this new role had popped up, and all we know about her is she's in prison. Her name is Maria, and she's very pregnant. And that's literally all I had to go on
Oh
that
wow.
day. And at that point, I was just completely frustrated with acting in general, and I had just called my manager to tell her that I didn't want to audition anymore, at least till the end of the year.
Oh wow. Okay.
And she had said, "That's so funny because I have one more audition for you. Do you remember that jail show on the computer?" And it's like, oh man, here we go. The jail show on the computer, and little did we know, what it really was going to become and what it really was.
Yeah.
But I walked in with that attitude, like I don't care, I'm not doing this anymore. I
Doesn't
give up,
matter.
and that was Maria in a nutshell. That attitude, that I don't care. Can we get this over with? You know, still happy to be there. I was happy to read for Jen, but I kind of was at the end of my rope, so to speak. And
Sure.
that's kind of exactly where Maria is. And it worked, and I was called back to work later that week.
Sure. So, I mean, that's incredible, right? And I think a lot of people can empathize with the feeling of just wanting to give up and not wanting to carry on or push through. What do you think it is that just got you there anyway? I mean, even though you had kind of,
Well, I told my mom that I was thinking of giving up acting and that I was sick of that hustle, the grind, the never knowing when your next work was coming. I didn't want to work in restaurants and bars and clubs anymore. I wanted something a little more secure
yeah,
because it is very stressful to wonder all the time when is going to be your next gig? When are you going to work again, even if you have a gig?
sure.
It weighs on you a lot, and living in New York is very expensive. It's very hard. And I told my mom that I was considering taking the Microsoft Tech test and
Okay.
training and just becoming a computer technician, which I love. I have fun with that. And I can do my music and my acting on the side.
Okay.
And my mom looked at me and said, Jessica, um, you can't do that. And I thought she would be really happy because I think your parents want you to be secure and
Sure.
have money. And that I would be making the wise decision. And she said, I don't think God put you on this earth to fix computers.
Oh wow. Okay.
And that kind of really threw me for a loop, considering that I thought that she'd be like, finally, she's woken up. This life is too hard. You know, so it was when my mom said that I really needed to reconsider. And then also when I got the gig
Yeah.
on Orange, I didn't know if it was going to be for a day, a week, a month. There was no set schedule of how
Time.
many times, right? Of how many times you would appear or reappear. And I knew then that I needed to quit everything. I quit my only other source of income, and I
Okay.
just kind of like trusted that if I had no plan B, that plan A had to work.
Okay. So I love hearing that because I personally am a huge believer of sort of having streamlined intent. And a lot of our readers and audience are in a phase in their life when they are kind of creating their careers for themselves. And I think that hearing you talk about this is very inspiring because it's actually hard work to get to where you want to go.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Anything worth doing is hard.
Yeah.
That's just the nature of the beast of kind of the way the world works. Sometimes there are days that seem like everything is kind of flowing and doors are
Yes.
open before you walk into them. But you have to also remember that it doesn't just happen like that.
Yeah.
It comes from a buildup of planting seeds, of putting in work, of, turning the soil and watching those plants grow, that finally the flower comes. And when the flower comes, you forget kind of
How much?
all the how much work it took. It took, thousands of years for that dirt to get there, for the seeds to be made, for the tilling of the soil. It didn't all just happen overnight. And people like to say, things like overnight success. There's no such thing.
Yeah. And so, for any aspiring actresses out there, what would you say is the most helpful thing to hold on to whilst it's tough?
You know that when you're breaking up with someone, it's not you, it's me. It's the other way. It's the other way around in acting. It's not you, it's them.
Yeah.
So remember that if you go in there with your skills, you go in there prepared. You're not wasting anyone's time. You really go in there with your intent and your best of your abilities to do a role, and you do well in an audition. Remember that there are millions of factors for a reason why you won't get a part. It could be as simple as you are 1 inch too short, or you're 1 inch too tall, or they had just cast the main person, the lead this morning, and you're supposed to be his sister, but you look nothing alike.
Okay.
Or you're supposed to be boyfriend and girlfriend, and you look too much alike, and it's a little creepy. or someone else accepted the role before they could get to you, or they completely they've changed the sex of your character, or you're like a foot taller than your, it's a million. You remind the person of, their ex-wife. You remind them of their second grade teacher that they hate. You wearing a perfume that just, turns them off and makes them sick. It could be a million things. So always remember that when you go in there with the best of your abilities on your brightest day. Be happy, make the room better than when you left it. And if you don't get it, it's not because of something
That's
you
wrong.
did. If you covered all your bases, or that you are. If you covered all your bases, then no need to worry and let it go.
Yeah. And so that sort of inner confidence that you're talking about, in a way, how do you cultivate that for yourself?
I think it's just a firm belief in karma and effort. If you really believe that something is meant to be, it will happen. And but you can't just sit there and let it happen. You have to actively pursue it, actively put your energy into it, whether that's taking class, reading up on things. When you're not, even for actors, things like watching movies and studying how cameras work, or watching documentaries, listen to that director's cut, things like that. It's where you put your effort that goes into it. So if you go in there knowing your craft, knowing who you're talking to, knowing who you're going to be seeing that day, what are you reading for? Read up a little bit before you go on an audition.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you just want me to speak about acting. I think this just
Can
applies
talk anything.
to anything.
Yeah.
If you're going in for a job interview, know the company, know who you're meeting with, know their brand, what they stand by, what they stand behind. Because a lot of times I've turned down opportunities because I didn't believe in the people that I would be working with. I didn't believe in their standpoints. I didn't agree with where they were coming from. So sometimes your ethics should be more than the paycheck. Should be more important than the paycheck.
And I think a lot of people need to hear that, and I think a lot of people want to do that, and fear kind of comes up.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all make mistakes in life, but if you can learn one thing from a mistake, is to never do anything that you'll regret later. That you feel now that if you're uncertain about it now, you should probably not do it. There are plenty of things that we've all done that in moments seem like the right, good, awesomest thing to do. And you look back, you're like, oh, I can't believe I did that. But if your heart was in the right place at that time, then, you chalk it up to experience. But then if there are times where something comes your way, a project, a job, an opportunity, and you're kind of not 100% behind it, not because you're afraid that maybe I won't be good at it, but you're afraid that, I don't know if it doesn't sit right, then that's probably a good sign to go. And that's different than fear of challenge or fear of failure. This is something that tests your core. When your core gets that feeling that this is not right, you should probably avoid that. And I know a lot of times we make decisions, especially because of money. You say,
Yeah.
look, I need the money now. Let me just do this, completely nude photo shoot, whipping and chopping up zebras. Why not?
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of extreme, but some
I
goes
love
against
it.
everything you do, and you say, oh, well, it's for art and I really need the money. But later, after that check is done and the money is spent, you still have to live with what you did. So was it worth it at
Yeah.
the end?
And I think I'm also hearing you talk about having that sort of inner guidance system, that intuition, that like niggle, right? That so many people don't listen to. And I think that's such a clear pathway tool. And so hearing you talk about it is very interesting to me. What does that feel like for you? What's your intuition like?
I just think I have a pretty good sense of self. I have a very solid ethical, moral foundation of what I think is good and not good. And I also, you learn to read people, especially our business is to become other people.
Yeah.
So we study people. So, when you meet someone and you get that bad feeling about someone, there's something to be said about that bad feeling. It doesn't mean that that person is bad,
Yeah.
or that they're trying to pull a fast one on you, or that they have ill intent, but it's something about your energies don't match. And that's different than not getting along with someone. It's sometimes you meet people and you have this really just bad feeling. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like your foresight telling you that maybe getting involved with this particular person or this at this particular time is not in your best interest.
Yeah. And I know, because we spoke a bit earlier that you're Buddhist, maybe you can tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Anything specific you'd like to know? Because that's
I don't
very
know. I mean, how does it influence your life? Is it a big part of your life?
It's the most important part of my life. It
Okay.
influences everything I do from waking up to going to sleep, and
Okay.
sometimes even in my sleep. Part of our practice is also to dedicate the dreams. May we do good things in our dreams and try to figure things out that we couldn't figure out during the waking hours while we're sleeping, which is kind of like a nice way to go to sleep.
Oh,
And
wow.
think about, before you go to bed, think about all the good things you've done and the bad things you've done, and how you can make the good things better and the negative things erase and fix, you
Sure.
know. But Buddhism infiltrates every aspect of what I do, including acting,
Okay.
because I feel like it is my job to tell these stories. So I have to become other people. And in order to do that, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes, which involves not judging them,
Same.
but there's a Buddhist practice called exchanging oneself with others,
Okay.
where you literally just try to become that other person in your mind and see the things that they've gone through, and figure out and understand why they act the way that they do without judgment. And once you start doing that, for not just for characters, for acting, but in your day-to-day
Yeah.
life, it makes living much easier when you realize, everyone is the star of their own show, so to speak. And if you see that person who, for example, is fidgety or rude or nervous or something, instead of being mad at them for being mad, you can try to figure out why they're mad. Well, maybe they had a rough day. Maybe they do need to skip ahead of me in this line. Let me let her go. And then usually people get kind of thrown off by that. And then everyone kind of calms down. And through that practice of constantly thinking of others and thinking of where other people are coming from, you develop great compassion. When you develop great compassion, you learn a lot of tolerance and a lot of insight, and kind of an intuitive nature of how human beings work.
And I hear you talking about it sounds like a deep level of compassion and mindful living, in a way, to have mindfulness about your sort of everyday and every moment, which, I mean, I try and practice that, but it can be incredibly difficult to stay present like that. Right?
Well, I mean, the more you do it, I think a lot of people, mindfulness is being used as kind of this buzzword,
Yeah.
for Vipassana meditation. But mindfulness is not just this moment right now. It's kind of all the time. And realizing that everything you do affects other people in some way, the tiniest little thing. Like if you drop something in the street, not realizing that later on someone may trip on it,
Yeah.
or everything you do in a day
Has
has some
consequences.
effect on someone else. Even slamming a door, for example, could wake someone up who just got home from work at 5 in
Yeah.
the morning, and you're leaving for work at 6, and you slam that door, and you've just woken the baby upstairs, or which doesn't happen in my house at all. Every day that happens in my house. So that's, it's a good practice for patience as well, and mindfulness. Instead of getting mad that someone slammed the door, you realize that you're nice and safe at home and they're leaving for work. And
Yeah.
so you can just kind of be happy for 1 second that you're done, you're good.
And I wanted to ask you, when you were talking about it earlier, about sort of becoming the other, are there ever times for you where you become so immersed in a role or a character that you do feel like you lose your sense of self?
No.
Okay.
I think that if you lose your sense of self totally, then you probably shouldn't be acting, and maybe you need some therapy. There should always be, you should not totally disappear.
Okay.
There are times and moments when you do disappear, in the sense that you're no longer kind of aware of cameras, or if you're on stage, audience, or you're completely in that moment of acting. But there does have to be some kind of governor, because this is an art form. It's not,
Sure.
completely, we're not like shape shifting
Yeah.
to the fullest extent. Well, even a shapeshifter has to stay, getting nerdy. Even a shapeshifter has to return to their original form,
Form.
or you'll lose your mind, and
Yeah.
it does happen.
Yeah.
People do lose their mind and they get too far into a role.
Yeah.
But that is where the art comes from,
Yeah.
is the art of knowing as you're performing, that putting in that work beforehand, so that you don't have to think anymore, and it kind of just happens naturally, that you've transformed enough and become enough this other person that you will react honestly the way that character would react. And sometimes that is not the way you
Would
personally react.
Amazing.
But if something, let's say like a light falls down, hopefully, you're aware enough that you should move. Things still do happen. The world did not magically transform, and you did not, completely just leave the planet. You're still there. You're
You're still there.
in imaginary environment still exists.
No, amazing, right? In your life, if you've ever overcome when you've overcome, not if, because everybody's got something, right? When you've overcome something difficult, what is the most grounding practice that you do for yourself?
Well, I mean, it depends on what the difficulty is, but I think at the end of the day, no matter what the difficulty is, and you feel that you've overcome it, to be very grateful and happy that things work out, and trust that everything does work out the way it's supposed to. Sometimes we may not like it, the way things work out, but, I hate to say it, one day you'll look back at this and
Be
laugh.
grateful. Yeah.
Or maybe not, maybe something very, very tragic happens and you won't laugh about it. But there's a reason why these things happen. And one day, we don't know when, we don't know how it's going to come, but one day you'll get that insight as to how and why it happened. And maybe you can either prevent it in the future, help others not do this in the future. Your experience may touch another person and change their lives through your tragedy. So everything that happens for a reason, and ultimately they can all be good.
Yeah, and I think that it's an amazing message to impart for our audience, that if you have the sort of raised awareness of where you're at in life, and looking back and understanding that everything kind of had purpose. Right? Is there anything you want to leave our audience with?
Just thanks for listening, and I really hope you appreciate the new season. When I tell you that we literally, not figuratively, but literally put in blood, sweat, and tears for it. It was really, really difficult to shoot, and we kind of pushed the boundaries of what we've ever done before.
Really?
And it was really hard, but I think it's really great, and I hope you all enjoy it.
And I'm sure we will. It is amazing watching you, and has been such a pleasure getting to chat to you. And thank you for taking the time out.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cool.